Penticton is a city in the Okanagan Valley of the southern interior of British Columbia. Penticton is between Okanagan Lake and Skaha Lake. Penticton is the seat of the Okanagan-Similkameen Regional District and the district's largest city by area and population. According to the 2024 Canada Census, Penticton has a population of about 39,000. In 1866, an Irishman, Thomas Ellis, and his family traveled to Penticton. By building a cattle empire and planting fruit trees, he started to develop a community. The sternwheeler SS Aberdeen began service on Okanagan Lake in 1892. Penticton was incorporated as a district municipality on New Year's Eve 1908. Shortly after, Ellis's fruit trees, many of them apple trees, started to grow. Residents packed the fruit in boxes so it could be shipped worldwide. In 1912, the Canadian Pacific Railway, the CPR, developed the Inkala Hotel for the city. The hotel operated for about 70 years. Penticton has a semi-arid climate, low precipitation, hot summer days with cool nights, and moderately cool, mostly cloudy winters. It averages 58.7 centimeters or 23.1 inches of snowfall per year, the mildest winter of any non-coastal city in Canada. The city is home to the Penticton Vees, a Junior A hockey team in the British Columbia Hockey League, known as the BCHL, and among the most successful Junior A teams in Canadian history. Penticton has a diverse array of public spaces, from parks to hiking trails. Penticton offers skiing at Apex Mountain, boating and fishing on Skaha Lake and Okanagan Lake, golfing, hiking, and cycling on the Kettle Valley Railway Trail, and rock climbing at Skaha Bluffs. Penticton is the largest retail and service center in the South Okanagan. It is the hub of wine tourism in the Okanagan Valley, with more than 40 wineries within city limits and 120 wineries within an hour's drive. The largest sources of employment are agriculture, forestry, manufacturing, mining, and the retirement industry. A photo in the Vernon archives shows what appears to be a Curtiss Pusher-type biplane stated to be over Penticton in 1917. It was possibly Billy Stark's aircraft. Stark, a Vancouver shoe merchant, learned to fly in San Diego at the Curtiss Aviation School. He received his Aero Club of America license, number 110, in April 1912. He was the first licensed pilot in BC and the second in Canada. If the picture is of Stark over Penticton, it would have been in either 1912 or 1914. The next aviator arrived for Dominion Day celebrations in 1919. Lieutenant Ernest O. Hall and mechanic Dudley Smith had flown from Vancouver, stopping at Chilliwack and Princeton for fuel. They had arrived in Penticton 2 days before. Hall was flying a Curtiss JN-4 Canuck belonging to the Vancouver Aerial Transportation Company, known as VATCO, V-A-T-C-O. The manager of VATCO, J.J. Simpson, had arrived earlier. He had arranged for the aircraft's arrival at the Turf Club Recreation Grounds on June 30th. For sponsorship of the event, the Turf Club paid VATCO $800. After the aerial exhibition and rides, Hall and Smith flew to Oroville, Washington for 4th of July celebrations, later returning to Penticton. The two men set out for Vancouver on July 5th with a fuel stop at Princeton. No further reference has been documented of an aviation presence at Penticton for almost the entire 1920s. With the formation of the Air Board in 1919 to control the licensing of pilots, aircraft, and airfields, the practice of barnstorming out of fairgrounds in populated areas ended, and Penticton did not have a dedicated airfield. In late September 1928, a new Alexander Eagle Rock called Northern Light arrived to barnstorm the city, offer rides for cash, and perform exhibition flights. Clyde Wan of the Yukon Airways and Exploration Company of Whitehorse had taken delivery of the aircraft in Denver, Colorado. After hiring pilot John Patterson, he had flown to Vancouver, where Canadian registration was assigned. The pair barnstormed their way to the Yukon, which took until December 1928, or about 3 months. While at Penticton, Wan is quoted as saying, "Business was so brisk that in 1 hour they had made 11 10-minute flights." Another documented arrival occurred between the summers of 1929 and 31. Humphrey Madden and Joe Bertolino were operating a flying school at Kamloops. On weekends, they visited towns in the area to promote their school, barnstorm, or offer rides for cash. The pair flew Madden's Fleet Model 2. Whether Madden used the Penticton Turf Club field or some other is unknown. Penticton hosted the BC Air Tour on July 7th of 1932. It had been organized by the Aero Club of BC out of Vancouver. As Penticton had no airfield, the air show used a meadow south of Queen's Park. Penticton resident Hugh Cleland recalls an impressive list of visiting aircraft despite poor weather on the coast. A formation flying team named the Three Musketeers of the Aero Club of BC took part. Other aircraft present that day in July included a Ryan B-1 Brougham owned by Jinder Coote, 2 Gypsy Moths from Vancouver, a 1932 Alexander D2 Flyabout, a Fairchild, an Aeronca C3 from Vancouver, a Waco, and 2 Alexander Eagle Rocks. The Penticton Herald reported that on the same day, Shell Oil's Lockheed Vega from San Francisco flew over, but continued to Vernon. The Vega returned the following day, landing at Penticton. Imperial Oil's famous pilot, Pat Reed, also arrived on July 8th, and his company's DH-80 Pussman. The stated aim of the tour was to promote the possibilities of aviation in the province. Pilots told local authorities before departing for Vernon that the airfield was far too short for regular flying. The city abandoned the idea of using this area south of Queen's Park for landings. During the next 2 years, the municipal council bought land south of the old Turf Club, where Lieutenant Hall had first landed in 1919. Penticton Reeve, Charles Oliver, wanted a real airfield. Penticton had been passed over by the federal government's airway development program. Instead, south of the city, construction of an intermediate field at the town of Oliver was taking place as part of the unemployment relief scheme. In 1936, the municipal council studied 3 new sites. An airways inspector with the Civil Aviation Branch of the Department of Defense and the engineer in charge working on the Oliver Airfield inspected the sites during 1937. They recommended the location on the Indian Band Reserve, west of the Okanagan River and north of Skaha Lake. Ottawa approved the plan after the original site was moved slightly to the north. Later, it was enlarged to accommodate a radio range station. The entire airport would lie on Penticton Indian Reserve Number 1. The original route of the Trans-Canada Airway had been via Princeton, Oliver, Grand Forks, and then Cranbrook. After this section of airway came into regular use, the Grand Forks range station gave navigational problems. These were, in part, solved by construction of 2 new range stations, one at Crescent Valley and a second at Carmi. The Penticton Herald editorialized in October 1938, quote, "Quite possibly the government will be prepared to give some assistance with the construction of a field at South Penticton near Skaha Lake, now that it learns that Penticton is directly under the line of Trans-Canada flight and is ideally suited for landing field purposes," unquote. With the coming of the Second World War in September 1939, airfield construction received increased priority from the federal government. In October 1940, the radio range navigational station at Grand Forks that had been shut down was moved to Penticton to create an instrument approach to that city's new airport. Trans-Canada Airlines closed its company communication station at Oliver in February 1941. Staff and equipment were moved to Penticton. By March 1941, airfield lighting was installed and operational at Penticton. On May 2, 1941, the first official landing took place when a Department of Transport Lockheed 12A touched down. The Department of Transport operated the Penticton Airfield throughout the war, largely for use by RCAF and other military flights. Number 124 Ferry Squadron established a detachment at Penticton to service and administer to itinerant Air Force flights. The Department of National Defense approved expansion to meet Air Force needs as an emergency airfield. This involved extension of the runway to 5,300 feet by 200 feet, plus a small taxiway, all of which was to be paved. This was finished by August 2nd, 1943. There is some question about where the contractor got the fill. A large number of rattlesnakes appeared, and airport staff were kept busy killing the snakes. The municipality had obtained the foreshore adjacent to the airport for a seaplane landing dock, which was developed before the outbreak of war. During 1941, the RCAF moved many Supermarine Stranraer twin-engine flying boats from the East Coast to Jericho Beach and 5 other West Coast flying boat stations for anti-submarine patrol. Most of them passed through Penticton, often refueling or holding for weather to improve on the coast. The aircraft crossed the prairies, landing at Waterton Lake and Nelson. Penticton was the last facility available until Vancouver at Jericho Beach. On September 17, 1942, an RCAF photographic aircraft, Bolingbroke number 9032, was temporarily based at airports from Princeton to Cranbrook. Its itinerary included a series of photographs of the Penticton Airport itself. The survey was concluded in about 6 days, and the group left for RCAF Station Sea Island at Vancouver. During the summer of 1945, a large American 4-engine aircraft arrived at Penticton. It appears to be a consolidated PB-4Y2 privateer. The aircraft would have been powered by 4 1,350 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engines. It had a 110-foot wingspan and a gross weight of 64,000 pounds. The crew would number from 11 to 13. This was undoubtedly the largest aircraft to have landed at Penticton. A temporary airport license was issued on November 1st, 1945. It showed the operator of the Penticton Airport as the Department of Transport for 24-hour operation. Dan McIver settled in Penticton and attempted fruit farming. He had been a pilot with RCAF number 124 Ferry Squadron, landing at Penticton many times during the war. Another fruit farmer, Dave Smith, aspired to aviation. Smith formed Philby and Smith Airways in 1946 at the Penticton Airport, offering flight instruction and charters. Smith convinced McIver to fly for him using a Piper J3 Cub, a Piper Cub Cruiser J5, and a Taylorcraft BC-12D. McIver flew for Smith until 1947. In 1948, Smith was killed and the air service ended. Trans-Canada Airlines closed the station in February 1949. The communications equipment installed at Penticton for company use in 1941 was no longer required. In 1948, L&M Air Services of Vernon got approval to operate a Class II scheduled service. Using a Beech 18 on floats, it linked Penticton, Kelowna, Vernon, and Kamloops. The Beech 18 was docked at the north foot of Main Street on Okanagan Lake. The Penticton Airport received a permanent license in May 1954. After a terminal building was opened in 1963, it was served by Canadian Pacific Airlines. The radio range had been upgraded with equipment from Dog Creek. After that radio range was decommissioned in the early 50s. The Penticton Regional Airport had been developed during the Second World War for military air transportation and served as an emergency landing strip until its tarmac was completed. In 2018, a $6 million upgrade expanded the departure and arrivals lounges and increased capacity for managing passenger flow. The Penticton Regional Airport, known as YYF, is 3.3 kilometers or 2.1 miles southwest of the city center. The runway is 1,829 by 45 meters or 6,000 by 148 feet. YYF is a 50-minute flight from Vancouver or a 4-hour drive. It is owned and operated by Transport Canada and serves the South Okanagan, Similkameen, and West Kootenays.